Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, and welcome back for those who have just arrived. From our Machzor, Mishkan Teshuvah, page 75. One of our most renowned prayers, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. This is an alternative reading. Avinu Malkeinu, why? Avinu Malkeinu, are you there? Do you care? Avinu Malkeinu, hear our prayer, hear our anger, hear our grief. Avinu Malkeinu, here is our prayer. Give us the strength to go on. Give us reasons to get up each day. Give us purpose and persistence. Help us to fend off fear and to hold on to hope. Help us to be kind. Give us dignity and give us courage. Avinu Malkeinu, show us the way to a year of goodness. Renew our belief that the world can be better. Restore our faith in life. Restore our faith in you. We have a saying in our household, you never know what people are carrying around. So many people are good at the brave face, or can keep calm and carry on, even when they are carrying enormous burdens. Grief and loss can be incredibly heavy burdens to carry, which is why it is good to come together as a community, to support each other, and see that we are not alone. We are a community this year with some familiar and loved faces who are missing. We are a community which has people grieving for loved ones we did not have the privilege to know. Each of us comes to Yizkor with our personal experience of grief and of loss. Who have you lost? Your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, or perhaps a child. Perhaps you are here remembering a grandparent or a close friend or even accompanying your parent or friend who is still grieving the loss of a loved one you may only have known through their stories or photos. I am remembering my father who died one Shabbat morning. I had visited him early that morning and was literally arriving here into the parking lot for services when I got the call from the hospital staff. Needless to say, I did not make it to services that morning. Rather, I did not even get out of my car, but instead headed straight out to care for my father, as well as to accompany my mother and family on this journey. This year has been an exceptionally difficult year. This year has been a year of communal trauma, of wearing yellow ribbons and dog tags or t-shirts demanding to bring them home, the ardent wish that the suffering of the hostages might end, as well as their families' ordeals, and that the healing may begin. I imagine there are many in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Gaza who are also just wishing for the trauma to end and the healing to begin. Just a few days ago, we commemorated the anniversary of October 7th, the most deadly day we have experienced since the end of the Holocaust. 1,200 murdered, raped, atrocities, some not even widely known yet because of the trauma and of the ongoing war. 250 hostages and the unimaginable trauma they have experienced day by day, minute by minute, moment by moment. Families torn asunder. The brightest hope for Israel, its youth, dragged into yet another war that has taken still more of their lives. A whole nation and people held in limbo as we daily wait for news of loved ones rescued or released. I can only imagine the fervor of the prayers of those hostages or of their families or the families of those killed last October 7th. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? when they say the words of Avinu Malkeinu. A Jewish historian, Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, notes that the word Zachor, remember, is repeated almost 200 times in our Hebrew Bible. Both God and Israel are commanded to remember. Remember the covenant, remember Shabbat, remember the exodus from Egypt. At Yizkor, our prayer asks God to remember our loved ones. But quite naturally, as we start to recite the prayer, we are flooded with the memories of those we have loved and whom we are here to honor. At Yizkor, we take the opportunity to cherish their memories and to acknowledge our grief. This Rosh Hashanah, how many of us have looked at the empty chair at our Rosh Hashanah dinner table and thought of their voices, their laughter, their jokes, or their poor choice of football club to barrack for? I remember my father's laughter, the twinkle in his eyes as he told a totally inappropriate joke, while sitting at the head of the table and presiding over our Rosh Hashanah family celebration. Even as he got older and I helped, still he would delight in being surrounded by his family. How he would have delighted in his grandchildren and in their shenanigans. How sad it is that they only get to know him through the stories and memories which we share, rather than through his actual presence and love. I look at my daughters, Elena and Emily, and they fill the room with peals of laughter as they scramble about their busy lives. Not now. Yet they never fill that empty chair. How my father would have loved to play with them or even to watch them play. Instead, they only know of him through the photos and the stories, but they often ask about him. I find it quite cathartic to speak of him and watch their delight as they hear some of the stories of his life. Their favorite has to be retold every time we drive past Albert Park Lake, and they want to hear when I was a little boy and fell in and Pepe had to fish me out. Henry James wrote, "Sorrow comes in great waves, but it rolls over us. And though it may almost smother us, it leaves us on the spot. And we know that if it is strong, we are stronger, inasmuch as it passes and we remain." At times, the sense of loss can be so great, we almost wish the waves would carry us off, because we cannot bear the pain of being left standing without the person we loved standing beside us. And yet our tradition of kriya, tearing a garment, is that it is always performed standing, signifying our strength, even at a time when we are in deepest mourning. Rending satisfies, according to Maimonides, the Rambam, the emotional need of the moment, or else it would be not otherwise be permitted. Kriya symbolizes that there is something broken or torn within us. While it may not be visible to the outside world, we express it through the rending of a garment as an external expression of our internal brokenness. Something has been shattered inside of us. What Jewish tradition understands is that even though we are permitted after a time to mend the tear, for some losses we can only use uneven stitches, because the rip, the tear in our heart, never fully heals. According to the Talmud, there were rabbis who were healers who could extend their arm and lift up the afflicted and heal them. One of these healers was Rabbi Yochanan. But when Rabbi Yochanan fell ill, he was healed by his contemporary Rabbi Hanina. Famously, the sages concluded that a prisoner cannot free himself from prison. One needs another to heal. And for this reason, the rites that Judaism has put around death and mourning are to ensure that we come together, that we envelop those in our community who experience loss and give them strength at a time when grief seems to take it all. Each of us is coming to this new year and to this Yizkor with our own grief. It may be as recent as the funerals which I facilitated in the past few days, or perhaps more distant. but our grief remains all too real. We may have lost an elderly parent who was unwell and ready to pass on, or a sibling or even a child with so much to look forward to. The Jewish lens is Shiva Shloshim and the Yahrzeit, yet loss is such a deeply personal experience colored by our relationship with our loved one, the circumstances of their death and how we feel about their death. Do we feel cheated that they were taken from us too soon? Or was death something of a friend after a long period of suffering? Even in these circumstances, we may take comfort in the fact that suffering has ended, but that doesn't necessarily mean we were prepared for the fact that an end to their suffering is just the start of us having to navigate a path without our loved one's presence. E. Cummins' well-known poem states, "I carry your heart with me, I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear, and whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling." Rabbi Heath, Wattenmaker, again comes back to the imagery of loss, sapping us of our equilibrium and our strength. And he says, "When the ground slips out from under us, what are the memories that prop us up? How do we share those memories and those memories of those we may have lost with the people around us now? How do we carry the memory of a loving touch, a knowing smile, a compassionate ear, the knowledge that someone would support you no matter what, who would still have a hug and a word of encouragement after a hard day? We carry all of it with us." Jonathan Safran Foer writes that Jews have 6 senses, not just 5. The 6th is memory. My mother would have said it's guilt, but that's okay. He claims that for Jews, memory is no less primary than the prick of a pin or its silver glimmer or the taste of the blood that it pulls from the finger. The Jew is pricked by a pin and remembers other pins. It is only by tracing the pinprick back to other pinpricks that the Jew is able to know why it hurts. When a Jew encounters a pin, he or she asks, "What does it remember like?" Here today at Yizkor, we remember our loved ones, our pinpricks. We think of the small things which defined their daily lives, what they liked for breakfast or how they brushed their hair or gave a good night hug or a kiss. We think of the unspoken depths of love contained within the smallest of gestures, the phone calls or the deliveries of chicken soup. The unconditional love shared and reciprocated, the depth of love and commitment and of shared experience. The shared plans for a bright future, a shared future, a future which was not to be. The things they did that drove you nuts, but now you would love to find that dirty mug in the sink or their socks on the floor. Only a few years ago, I buried my father, my grandparents, and most tragically, my 28-year-old cousin, who took his own life after a number of years struggling with mental illness. Having witnessed what his struggles and then the tragic circumstances of his death did to his parents, my uncle and aunt, is perhaps one of my most profound and devastating experiences. The death of a child is universally feared because it is so far outside the conditioned natural order of things. A good friend once described the grief he feels for the daughter he lost as being a hole in his heart which never heals, but which he has worked out a way to live around one day at a time. For some of us, the best we ever manage is to find a way to get by. Healing is never actually completed. Rather, it remains a lifelong process of coping. Having accompanied many families through the loss of loved ones, burying their husband or wife or sibling, the loss of a child leaves a mark that is indelible, especially when it is a young child or infant. Despite facilitating so many funerals for young and for old, I have to acknowledge that I struggle to imagine the depths of grief such a loss might entail. It is when we delve into the different types of loss that we realize Yizkor, remembering, is unique to each mourner. When I think about my grandparents, father or cousin, I have the comfort of happier memories of having loved and been loved in return, of knowing that they lived. For families who lose a child or an infant, who miscarry or deliver a stillborn child, the loss is different. They may not have as many memories to hold on to, and they are instead left with devastated hopes of a life they anticipated, of memories and milestones they looked forward to, but will never realize. Loss is the very opposite of one size fits all. I think of some of the key symbols of my own grandparents. My grandmother's treasured Singer sewing machine sits on my dining room mantelpiece, while my grandfather's wind-up grandfather clock rests in a place of honor in my cousin's home. My father's fob watch is treasured by my brother, and my wife has her grandmother's handbag with notes and lotto numbers handwritten on the backs of envelopes, and the faint smell of her perfume still on the lining. She didn't have the winning numbers. The tangible things we connect with our memories are both comforting and difficult, yet we are blessed to have had them. Imagine how much harder this grief is to carry for those who don't have something tangible to touch or hold on to. The loss of an infant or child leaves us with fewer of the physical reminders, but just as many scars. Jewish tradition is not to bring flowers to a grave, but rather to bring a stone. Flowers ultimately wilt and die, just like we ultimately wilt and die. Whereas the stone we place on the loved one's grave is everlasting. Although there is a tradition in Jewish cemeteries of sharing is caring. Just a dot of superglue does wonders. Our memories are tied to these physical representations, but what is most lasting and perhaps most important is the impact that our loved ones have had on who we are and on who we have become. Rabbi Simcha Bunim Bonhart of Prishusha, an 18th century author, used to say that he carried 2 slips of paper, one in each pocket. On one he wrote, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, for my sake the world was created. And on the other he wrote, Vanochi afar ve'efer, I am but dust and ashes. This teaching was to help remind us to be humble, but also that according to Jewish tradition, the whole world was created in order that we might exist. Saving a single soul is as if we have saved the world. We too would not be here if it was not for our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors. We would not be who we are if not for our families, our siblings, our partners, our friends, and even our children. We are formed and shaped by our interactions and our relationships. We are loved by the souls of those with whom we interacted, and especially those we love. Avinu Malkeinu, show us the way to a year of goodness. Renew our belief that the world can be better. Restore our faith in life. Restore our faith in you. And let us remember our loved ones. Celebrate their memories and their impact upon us. May their memories truly be for a blessing. And we say, Amen. Ken Yiratzon.